let's kind of just dive right in here to this mock offseason plan from Paul Dehner Jr. As I mentioned, he does a great job of just breaking it down. Okay, these are all the positions that you have on a football team. These are the positions that Cincinnati needs to address. Here are some cuts that inevitably are going to happen. Here are some potential restructurings that could take place, some potential extensions that could take place, and potential trades as well that could take place. And when you look at different off seasons in the NFL, a lot of time it's very complicated. But when you're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, it's pretty straightforward because they don't do stuff out of the box for one, and they don't have a ton of cut candidates here this year for Cincinnati. So it's kind of just go down the list here. We'll go offense, which is a lot easier than defense. We'll talk about defense. We'll talk about cuts, and we'll talk about something that I think is the most under-discussed topic of the offseason for the Cincinnati Bengals. Stick around for that. All right, backup quarterback. It's a position that needs to get addressed. We know this. We understand this. Now, all this conversation is about how much of it cap hit there's going to be for 2026. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, length of contracts or how long these contracts are or how much these players are going to make. I'm just talking specifically as it relates to the cap. Cincinnati, Paul Dehner Jr. projects that they will have about $35 million to spend. They technically have more than that, but when it comes to paying guys on the practice squad and draft picks, saving money for that, he's including all of that into the $35 million number. So in Paul's eyes, he goes, we're going to have about $35 million for the Cincinnati Bengals to spend. And the past few years he's done this, he's been very accurate as far as his projections. I think like within $5 million. So safe bet to say that the Bengals are going to spend around $35 million here this offseason towards the cap. Backup quarterback, as I mentioned, something that you need to address. When you talk about a top-of-the-line backup quarterback, Marcus Mariota really is that guy, and he's going to be paid $8 million. Paul projects against the cap. I'm going to keep saying paid, but it's against the cap, $8 million cap hit. Bengals, they don't need to do that, right? Marcus Mariota is a guy that you bring him in, you're like, yeah, you know what, he's going to start some games. And I do think it's important for the Bengals to value backup quarterback, given the injury history of Joe Burrow, but to pay $8 million against the cap, no interest in that. Jake Browning, he can't be back on this team. We appreciate all the things that he has done. We appreciate his attitude, right? Getting benched, that can't be easy, but by all accounts, stayed a good teammate, has been great within the building. That's why he's been able to stick around for as long as he has. Undrafted guy, a lot of respect for him. His time here in Cincinnati is done. He'll be going elsewhere. Hopefully for him, he can land somewhere. Tyrod Taylor is a guy that Paul projects $5 million against the cap. Doesn't really seem to fit what Cincinnati does here offensively. So you can go through some of these names. Zach Wilson. Do you want Zach Wilson here with the Cincinnati Bengals? He's going to get like $4 million. No. Jimmy G is going to be available. Maybe some interest there in that, bringing in Garoppolo, but he doesn't really feel like a Cincinnati Bengal, right? He seems like more of a West Coast guy. I think if you're the Rams, you have interest in bringing him back as a free agent to continue to back up Matthew Stafford. Sam Howell doesn't really seem like a fit here, just throwing out some names here. And then those are going to be more of the expensive guys, and then you could get some bargain guys that Paul has listed at about $2 million. But he has the projected cap hit for Joe Flacco being $4.5 million. Which, for a backup quarterback, is that a little steep? Maybe. But when you have Joe Burrow in place and your hopes and dreams rest on the shoulders of Joe Burrow, it's important to have that backup position checked off. And I'd be doing everything in my power if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals to bring back Joe Flacco. I've said that multiple times here on this show. Now, there might be another team out there. Miami is one that comes to mind where it's like, actually, we want Joe Flacco to start for us this year. And if that's the case, Joe Flacco isn't coming back here, right? He was very clear that he wants to keep playing. He's not retiring, and obviously he wants to start, right? Being the backup to Joe Burrow, yeah, he would do it. And if you're Joe Flacco and you're going to be a backup, don't think there's really better places to be a backup than here in Cincinnati. But if another team's going to give him an opportunity to start, he obviously is going to take that. If that doesn't happen, I'd bring Joe Flacco back here, right? It's one of the first things I do, check off that position, because I've said this multiple times on the show as well. If Joe Flacco had started every single game that Joe Burrow did not, i.e. no Jake Browning experience this past year for Cincinnati, they could still be playing right now, right? And I know it's crazy to say, but they still could be, right? Because I definitely think they would have found a way into the playoffs, because I think they win one or two of those games with Joe Flacco as opposed to Jake Browning. But, some people are throwing out Case Keenum, right? I think if you're the Bengals, you have to value that position, right? You have to have somebody that can come in and you trust, and it's got to be a veteran guy, and I don't think there's anybody better than Joe Flacco, right? As far as a backup quarterback coming in and having success, That's as good as it gets for how Joe Flacco came in here and performed. Why mess it up? And that's going to be a reoccurring theme on the offensive side of the ball, which we'll get to. Joe Flacco, $4.5 million against the cap. I would do it. Now you talk about extension candidates. And we're kind of going down the list here of the positions offensively, so we'll touch on this one. I think there's 3 guys that you're looking at as possible extension candidates. Chase Brown, running back, and then 2 of your corners, Dax Hill and DJ Turner. I think it's important to reward players that deserve to be rewarded, right? Chase Brown is electric. Could you make the argument that the Bengals could have high levels of success without him? Yeah, but he fits in perfectly here. He's great. He's available. He's great out of the backfield. He can block well now, too. That's something he's really improved upon. So, to me, I would extend Chase Brown, right? Can you extend all 3 of these guys? I think there's a world where you can, and I don't think it would be a mistake to do it, right? And when you talk about these extensions, the cap hit isn't really significant until you get later in the contract. In other words, it's not this year where it's really significant. So, all these extensions, Dehner only has it as a $2 million hit for all these guys, which is, again, this is very accurate the way he does this. So Chase Brown, if you extended him, it would only be $2 million against the cap for this year. To me, it's a no-brainer. I would do it. Do you want to pay a running back a ton of money? I get there's risk involved with that, but the Bengals have made their approach here very clear. They value offense at a very high level. Is it because they want to get butts and seats? Maybe, but we're all tuning in to watch those boys go out there offensively, regardless of how bad the defense is. And I think they can win this way on offense. They've proven they've been able to do it in the past. And if you develop well enough on defense, which they haven't been able to do the past 2 years, I still think you can win paying as much money as the Bengals pay on offense. I think an extension for Chase Brown makes sense. Backup running back spot. You got P. Ryan under contract. Don't mess with it. You got Brooks in your back pocket, who I question whether or not he can, play at the NFL level. I've got some concerns there, but he was a rookie last year. I don't need that position to be addressed beyond extending Chase Brown. And if you don't want to extend him this offseason, you want to create a little bit of drama there. Would it be the end of the world? No. But you have an opportunity here for this to be a very clean offseason. You've had the drama the past few years with Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, it's been a nightmare situation for you. And then the T. Higgins thing. He's like, well, I'm holding out. And he's like, actually, screw it, I'm going to play. Jamar, he's showing up, but he's not practicing. Joe Burrow, we knew he was going to get paid, but we're all sitting there like, okay, when's it going to happen? You have an opportunity here this offseason to really be distraction-free, which this day and age of the NFL doesn't come around very often. Reward a guy that's been great. You took him in the 5th round. He's been awesome. He looks a heck of a lot better than a 5th-round pick. Chase Brown, of course, is who I'm talking about. I would extend. Receivers. Could you make an argument to bring in a wide receiver 3? You could. But I want as much possible money going towards the defense as you possibly can. Right? Yoshi without Joe Burrow seems like a good dude. I hate to come on here and bash him, but without Joe Burrow, I don't know if he's an NFL caliber player. I ain't good enough to be on a roster, but as far as be out there and get a lot of run, probably not. But when Joe Burrow's out there, looks good. I'm fine with him out there as a 3. Had the drop issues early. When Burrow came back, he looked pretty good. He's tough. He takes shots over the middle. I can respect that. I can respect his attention to detail there as well. And when you have Higgins and Chase, you don't need, and Gesicki, you don't need your 3 to be some great guy. And there's an argument out there to be made of, well, what if you add another wide receiver? What if you draft Carnell Tate? I think that's ridiculous, right? Because the argument for those people is like, well, then you'd be unstoppable on offense. Well, you're just about unstoppable on offense right now, and your defense stinks, right? So I think it would be a massive mistake for the Bengals to pay somebody as a receiver or draft a receiver in the first 4 rounds. I think it would be a total mistake. You can win with Yoshi in 2026 if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. Absolutely. With Joe Burrow playing quarterback. I wouldn't mess with that. Jamar and T, of course, are back. We know this. We understand this. Gesicki, Sample, your tight ends. You could cut him. You could. I don't know why you would, right? You paid Gesicki last offseason. He got hurt, but he came back. Burrow was here. It looked good. Sample, really underrated player for this team. Drew Sample's a great player. Now, you took him in, the 2nd round when you drafted him, which was a bit of a reach, but he's an NFL guy. He brings winning to this team. He is a valuable component to winning. And, he might not be catching balls left and right. Had the, nice game against Miami from a pass-catching perspective. But Joe Burrow trusts him. He blocks his butt off. Your tight ends, you don't need to address that room at all, right? You don't need to cut anybody. You got good contracts in place for Sample and Gesicki. You got Eric All coming back, who's a wild card, right? Double knee surgery, had it in college as well, had back issues. So he might, just be a shell of himself. Hard to predict here at this point, but you roll the dice there. You trust the guys you have behind him. You just gave Tanner Hudson an extension, which was a no-brainer. I wouldn't address the tight end position at all. Offensive line. The first question when it comes to the offensive line is, do you cut Orlando Brown Jr. or do you not? I would not. Is Orlando Brown Jr. the guy that you paid, right, the big-time money? Has he lived up to that? No. Is he good enough? Yeah. And you look at how he relates to the rest of, left tackles in the National Football League. I think, especially with the star quarterback, left tackle is the second most important position on the team behind quarterback, and he's good enough, right? You need a plan for 2027, which we'll talk about more here on the show. But for 2026, keep the band together. Bengals love that phrase. Oh, keep them together, having success. I'm fine with it. That offensive line, the last few weeks, those boys were humming. Don't break it up, right? We've been talking about the offensive line being an issue ever since Burrow got here. You finally have a unit that you believe in. Run them back out there again. Somebody's going to get hurt. They were pretty lucky on the offensive line with injuries this year, so you're going to need a backup plan. But I'm not going to cut Orlando Brown Jr. at this point because I just don't. What are you going to do? You're going to draft a guy? Well, that pick should be going to defense and then start a rookie at left tackle? I don't know about that. And then there's nobody on the open market that's going to be better than Orlando Brown Jr. And in free agency, you would have to overpay for them anyway. So OBJ, I'm fine keeping him at left tackle. But in the back of your mind, this draft class, either in the third or fourth round, you got to be thinking about your left tackle of the future or understand that going into next offseason, the defense better be cleaned up because priority number one is going to be left tackle. It doesn't have to be right now, though. I'm fine with OBJ coming back. Fairchild will start at left guard. No questions asked. Center, Ted Karras. Could you potentially cut him? Yeah, why would you, right? Is he as good of a player as he was his first year here? Maybe not. Is he taking a slight step in the wrong direction? You could argue that. Is he a great center by any stretch? No. But this Bengals team, they talk about leadership, and it seems like they have a lack of leaders. Well, it's going to be magnified if you take away Ted Karras. He's an outstanding leader, right? And also, he embodies what it means to be a Cincinnati Bengal. He's a great ambassador for the organization. He's great in the community, which you might laugh at that and say, who cares? I want to know how he plays on the football field. I value that kind of stuff. And at that position, I think you have the ability to do it. And clearly there's a good rapport there with Joe Burrow. Clearly there's a good rapport with the offensive line, the rest of his guys that he's blocking with. I wouldn't cut Ted Karras. I'd bring him back, right? Again, that's got to be a position that you have in the back of your mind. You got McLaughlin, who you got as a UDFA out of Ohio State. Could he potentially be a future at center? Your 7th-round pick 2 years ago in Matt Lee out of Miami. Could he potentially be a solution for you going forward at center? Maybe, but he hasn't really flashed to this point. A couple years down the line, you got to be worried about center. 2026, I'm good with Ted Karras coming back. Right guard. You don't know what you're doing at this point. There's several options that Paul Dehner lists out here. Lucas Patrick, he predicts will be about 1.5 against the cap. Guy named David Edwards, that'd be about $17 million. Elijah Vera Tucker, those are like top-of-the-line guys as far as interior offensive linemen. Dylan Parham, who played for the Raiders there, certainly. I don't think you need to go out there and overpay for one of these guys because you have a solution in place here in Dalton Reisner. Seems like a no-brainer to me. It worked last year. The Bengals have struggled immensely when it's come to evaluating free agents in the interior offensive line the past few years. Looks like they corrected that here with Dalton Reisner. You have a guy behind him that Jalen Rivers, we'll talk about him more in a second, but he had to play and it was okay. Wasn't great, but it was like, okay, if we can continue to work with him, he can get to a point where he's a serviceable backup for us. That got a lot of run as a rookie, which I think is huge. But bring back Reisner. Dehner predicts about $4 million against the cap. Sign me up. Right? Do it early, right? Do it now, right? I should be getting a notification right now that it's happening. Don't wait for this thing to get into free agency and get into a bidding war with one of these other teams because I do think, based on the season that he had, other teams will be interested in his services. Get out ahead of it, right? Doesn't need to be some multi-year thing. Get him for a year, right? And then you continue to address the offensive line after this year. I'd bring back Reisner. Mims at right tackle, non-negotiable. You understand that. And then I would bring in a bottom of the road, or not a bottom of the road, but a cheaper free agent option along the offensive line. Dehner predicts about $2 million. Bring somebody in, ideally not Lucas Patrick, but I feel like this team would consider that just because they like his versatility, and if something were to happen to Karras, he's kind of your backup center. But I think you got to bring in one body along the offensive line. Would do it sooner rather than later. Don't overpay for him. It's not a guy that you want to be your starter week one, but inevitably injuries will happen. And that next interior guy I think is Jalen Rivers. Again, I think he showed enough as a rookie. That playing time that he got when Reisner was not playing was huge. That will go a long way. I think there's something there future starter, not going to get carried away, but serviceable backup. I think he works into the equation. Your 5th-round pick out of Miami last year, you keep him around. He's your kind of next guy backing up from an interior perspective. That's the offense. We'll kind of get into these cut candidates here as well, and then we'll talk about restructure, and then we'll talk about defense lastly. We've talked about cut candidates on the show previously. We have that video. It's out on YouTube. Check it out. Type in Bengals cut candidates on our Chatterbox page. It'll pop right up. Usually you go into these offseason and it's like, well, there's a laundry list of guys that could be cut candidates. It doesn't feel like that is the case this year for Cincinnati. And there's a couple of no-brainer cuts, in my opinion. Cody Ford, to me, is a no-brainer cut. He had his moment in the sun, catching the ball out of the backfield. We'll all remember that. We'll all look back on that moment very fondly. But the expectation for him was to come in and compete for one of the guard spots. He couldn't even throw his name in the ring. He came in out of shape. And then the whole thing with him is like, oh, he's a valuable swing tackle. Well, why does he feel like a valuable swing tackle for you? Because he didn't play, right? Because Mims and OBJ were out there all year. If he was asked to go in there and take meaningful snaps, I don't know if a lot of people would have the same mindset on Cody Ford. Tried it for a while. He's been a part of your team, right? A part of your 10 guys along the offensive line. His hit, you save $2.9 million if you get rid of him. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I'd get rid of him. Oren Burks is another guy I'd get rid of, right? He was a guy that was in a room with 2 rookies who were not playing well at all, and he couldn't earn more playing time. I think when the Bengals brought him in, the expectation was just kind of special teamer and backup, and that's what he ended up being. But $2.3 million you get if you cut him. That's a move that I would make, and I think that's pretty obvious. As probably not going to cut Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter because there's year 2 of their rookie deals. Clearly have to rework that room. It makes a ton of sense for Oren Burks to be on the outside looking in. So this is opening up some more money to spend, which is adding to that $35 million total that we mentioned when we began this segment. And then you have a couple of interesting names. And I think, to me, this is what I'm most fascinated to see what Cincinnati does, and that's at that interior defensive line spot. And when Duke Tobin talked at the end of the year, he prioritized edge rusher as the number 1 need, which, well said, and it needs to get cleaned up. But the interior also needs to get cleaned up there as well. It wouldn't surprise me if B.J. Hill and T.J. Slayton were back. Well, if they're back, the Bengals, you know how they feel about guys on their rookie deal. Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson are going to be back, and then you're going to look there and say, oh, it's the same party of guys along our interior defensive line. They all stink, right? Again, I haven't turned in my final draft here. I'm going back and forth. B.J. Hill, respect what he's done here in Cincinnati throughout his career to this point. Thought it was a mistake when the Bengals paid him last offseason, and I think I'd probably cut him. That's where I'm at right now. Because you save $4.8 million against the cap. That frees up a lot of space for you to work with. I just am in a tough spot where you bring back both Slayton and Hill with as bad as it was. And Hill became more of a rotational guy. He was taken off the field on 3rd downs because he didn't provide anything as far as a pass rush goes. Are there names out there that you're like, oh, he's definitely better? I think the top name is DJ Reader, and then you got to evaluate his performance last year in Detroit and say, okay, how can we project how he'll play this year for Cincinnati? But that's kind of why I haven't turned in the final draft yet, because I don't know. I think they need to cut either him or Slayton because you can't just run it back with the same group and expect different results. I guess I would lean B.J. Hill to cut over Slayton, but I don't know. That's going to be a huge decision that Cincinnati has to make. Okay. And now we get to the Trey Hendrickson stuff. There is a world where they tag him and they intend for him to play for this team. I don't think that's going to happen. They would then be paying him like $35 million, which is absurd, coming off the injury. I wouldn't bet on that at all. And then there's the tag and trade, which I think some front offices and teams, you'd be like, okay, that's probably what they'll do. Try to get like a 3rd-round pick, right? But understanding the rest, his value has gone down because the Bengals don't have as much leverage now because everyone would be like, well, we know you don't want him, right? So could the Bengals execute a situation like that and trade him? I just kind of don't see them doing that, to be honest. And, again, this is kind of when we started this segment, all the ins and outs to that, what that would look like. I need somebody smarter than me to explain it to me because I really don't know. But I just find it hard to believe that they would do a tag and trade because it just doesn't seem very Bengal-like. So I think with Hendrickson, it's like you move on. He walks, and then you get your conditional pick, whatever that ends up being. But that's kind of where I'm at with the Hendrickson stuff. The second part to that, as far as our restructure goes, is Joe Burrow, and this is what we teased at the end of Off the Bench. I think this is the number one thing for the Bengals this offseason that not enough people are talking about. Restructuring a contract, that's not going to impact how much money Joe Burrow gets. It just impacts when the cap number hits, right? It's basically pushing money down the line. You see the Eagles do this all the time. A lot of successful teams do this. And it helps you out in the short term, but it could potentially put you in a tough spot long term. And my way of thinking is that's fine, right? You are in win now mode if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. You haven't made the playoffs in a couple of years. That's ridiculous. Certainly Joe Burrow injuries have factored into that, but you go all in now, right? At some point, there's going to be kind of a second iteration for the Bengals. You could argue they're in it right now. First iteration would be Joe Burrow on his rookie deal. Now Joe Burrow when you're paying him. Well, hopefully there's a third iteration when Joe Burrow's still your quarterback, but T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are no longer in their prime. I want to go all in while they're in their prime and then deal with it afterwards when they're not. And hopefully Joe Burrow is still in place as your quarterback. But a restructure to me makes a ton of sense. It's not something the Bengals do. They hate doing it. But they've made exceptions to the rule with Joe Burrow multiple times in the past. And if they were able to do this, Paul Dehner projects that would give them $12 million of additional cap space this year, which is huge. That is you could get a star pass rusher. It could help you get a star pass rusher. I would do it. Again, I have no clue whether or not Cincinnati will or not. Joe Burrow has been open to doing it. Again, it shouldn't really matter to him because he's still getting all of his money. It's just, when the cap hit goes into place. But to me, that's a fascinating discussion because that opens up so much more room if Cincinnati were to restructure it. Are they going to wait and try to restructure it later? I don't know. Charlie Goldsmith, who does a great job covering the Bengals and the Reds, when he did his breakdown, he does not have the Bengals restructuring. I don't know if that is his way of saying he doesn't want that to happen or just simply doesn't think there's a world where Cincinnati does it. That's fascinating because when you're filling out this chart from Paul Dehner Jr., it looks totally different if you restructure Burrow, whether you don't. And it's so much more money if you do, whether you don't. I don't know. That is, to me, a fascinating storyline that nobody's talking about because so much money comes into play if you were to restructure Joe Burrow. So that's also why I'm kind of holding off on sending in the final draft here. Before we do defense, let's do draft picks. The Bengals obviously have more than 4 draft picks, but Dehner includes 4 here in this spot because that's like those top 4 are definitely playing for you at this point in some kind of role. At 1, I've been very clear about this. I've said it a million times. I'm going to continue to say it. If Downs is there, take him. I don't care if Ruben Bain's still there. I don't care if David Bailey, if one of those 2 guys somehow is still there. If Downs is there, take him. Right? There's your safety. There's a guy that is going to play safety here for a long, long time if you get him. To me, it's a no-brainer. Second round. Again, we talk about how Duke Tobin's like edge rusher, edge rusher. Well, he said that last offseason, and they didn't really execute that properly. But I would say that the second-round pick for an edge rusher, especially if you go safety in round 1, very much in play. I went Zion Young out of Missouri. Nice player, high upside, production in college, right? Not some 4.5 sack guy throughout his college career. I like him a lot out of Missouri. Third round, Jacob Rodriguez, which I was honestly surprised. Again, we haven't fully dove into draft stuff yet. I thought Rodriguez was more of a second-round pick. Dehner says 3 or 4. Absolutely. Best linebacker in college football this past year. That's a guy that comes in, and he's ready to go right now. Right? Again, there's some size concerns, maybe speed concern. He's going to be really good in the NFL. Right? He's going to be a solid, not going to say all-pro guy, but he's going to be a solid NFL starter. That's what you need. Right? Jacob Rodriguez. That's who I got in the third round. Then round 4, fine taking a corner. We'll talk about Jeremiah's mock here in a second. But D'Angelo Pons is a guy that if you watch the college football playoff, you probably just started liking him then. I started liking him at the beginning of the year. Dude's tough, competitor. High school teammate with Jeremiah Smith. He hung right in there with Jeremiah Smith in the Big Ten championship game, which I thought was impressive. The size and weight, or the height and weight, I guess, of Pons is concerning. That's why you got him in the 4th round. He's like 175.9. Not great, but you could put him in more of a nickel spot, a Mike Hilton role, not necessarily ask him to line up on the outside. He's got great wheels. He's sticky in coverage, knows how to win, is a winner, competes like a dog. I like him a lot. Again, you're not asking him to go to the outside. I get the concern with his size, but Denzel Ward, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's pretty good, right? A pretty good player there in Cleveland, so I went with Pons in the 4th round. Now you get to defense, and this is where stuff gets wacky. We'll start in the secondary. I went Caleb Downs, obviously, with the pick, so that means Caleb Downs is slotted in Geno Stone's spot. Geno Stone, by the way, threw the deuces up on Twitter. I think that means he's out. Second, I got Jordan Battle. Not great, but just this is kind of where I'm at right now. Again, not the final draft. We'll do that later in the week, maybe next week as well. The Bengals seem like they're pretty content. So I'm trying to mix this as far as what I would do, but also being as realistic as possible, right? So I'm like doing like, yeah, this is what I would do, but also like I'm not going out there and signing Jalen Phillips, even though that would be awesome, right? Because that would shock everybody if Cincinnati did that. Battle seems like they want to start him at safety. Downs and Battle, we'll see if that helps. It looks a heck of a lot better than Stone and Battle, I can tell you that much. Now your corners. We talked about the other extension candidates, and, you know, when you're doing the math here with the $2 million that is going to be the cap hit if you extend these guys, as Dehner pointed out, I think Turner definitely gets one. Again, reward some of your guys that have done good stuff for you and going to be a part of your future. I think that's big. Limit the distractions, right? Help the face of your organization out a little bit so not everybody's dragging you through the mud at all times. Turner should be extended, right? Give him an extension, and I kind of want to extend Dax Hill too. And again, I haven't done the final draft, but I think, you know, to extend both of those guys should be in play for Cincinnati. You got your corners there at that spot. Your next rotational piece, your fourth corner, Josh Newton, right? You know, he goes into year 3. He's shown some flashes. Is he ever going to be a starter for you if nobody's hurt? No. But as far as a backup rotational guy, sure. I've got Pons, who I drafted in the 4th round, in the slot for Cincinnati. Think that could be pretty cool with Dax Hill and DJ Turner. Then you get to the linebackers. And I think you have to go in and spend big money on a free agent name. I think you absolutely have to go in there and get a 1 at that linebacker spot. The best linebacker on the market is going to be Quay Walker for the Green Bay Packers. He's awesome. If I'm Green Bay, LaFleur, Gutekunst, all those guys up in Green Bay, I'm doing whatever I can to keep him because I think that tandem with Cooper, there's your linebackers in Green Bay, like that works. Dehner projects $18 million against the cap, which is a lot. But would I pay for Quay Walker? Yeah, I would. I absolutely would pay for Quay Walker. Devin Lloyd, $17 million against the cap. What Dehner projects. Devin Bush, $13 million against the cap. Nakobe Dean, this is the name that I'm really flirting with, $12 million against the cap. I think we all would love to see Nakobe Dean come here to Cincinnati and be your leader at that linebacker spot. I absolutely would pay for him. Who else we got? Bobby Wagner, he says $9 million. I think he's over the hill. I would not bring him in. Demario Davis, $8 million. Alex Anzalone, $7 million from Detroit. Caden Ellis, $8 million. Levante David, also getting up there in age 7. Alex Singleton, $6 million. Quincy Williams, $5 million. Matt Milano, $4.5 million. Some other names certainly to consider there at this point. But right now, Nakobe Dean jumps out to me. Are the Bengals going to get in a bidding war for Quay Walker? Probably not. And Nakobe Dean's going to garner a sizable deal. But to me, when you look at defense, I think the linebacker class in free agency is better than edge rusher and defensive tackle. So you got to add all 3 of those rooms. But I think to go out there and really get aggressive in free agency and pay for a top-of-the-line guy, I think you can do it at linebacker without having to overpay as much as you would at edge and interior defensive line, if that makes sense. Then, remember I drafted Jacob Rodriguez. I have him as your second guy, and then Demetrius Knight can be your third guy, and then you hope that Barrett Carter never sees the field. That's kind of where I'm at right now. They're not going to quit on both guys. They're not going to quit on either one of them, although I would argue they should quit on at least one. Demetrius flashed a little bit there at the end, but you cannot go into next year of, okay, that's our best linebacker, Demetrius Knight Jr. Can't happen. I would say 3. Bengals will probably do 2, but that to me, you get a Nakobe Dean, you get a Quay Walker, get a big name, even an Alex Anzalone. Bring him in, and that can clean up that room really nicely for you. Go out there and do it. You have the money to be able to go out there and do it. That's linebacker. That's the secondary. And then you get to the defensive line, as I mentioned. These are kind of some of the stuff I'm going back and forth on. B.J. Hill, T.J. Slayton, I would cut one of them, but you look at this list of guys of who are going to be available free agents, and it's nobody really jumps out at you. You know, Daquan Jones, Dehner projects $8 million cap hit. He's like 34, 35 years of age. He's had a solid career. Recently has been in Buffalo. but the production doesn't really jump out at you. But I think there's an option for you along the interior. Even if you go low-level guys, that's going to be like $2 million. Shelby Harris, Dehner projects $3 million. Sheldon Rankins, who we don't want to experiment there again, that's $5.5 million. Or just some other names to consider. We mentioned Jones. John Franklin Myers, another name. So I don't really have a ton of names for you as far as defensive tackles, nose tackles go, but you can't run it back with this room because Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson can't play, and I don't know if Slayton and Hill can play good enough. So I don't know. That to me is going to be fascinating how they address that. And then edge. When are you going to I took Zion Young in this mock, right? I think you have to draft a rookie there as well, but you have Shamar Stewart. I'm ready to be done on him, but you can't if you're the Bengals, and clearly they haven't quit on him yet. He's going to continue to still be in play for him, but you have to go get a 1 as your rusher. And Miles Murphy can be a really good 2. Let's not get carried away and say he's a 1 because he ain't, all right? And the top name, besides Trey Hendrickson, funnily enough, is going to be Jalen Phillips. And if you restructure Burrow, there's a real world where you can go out there and get him. But there's going to be a bidding war, obviously, and he's probably going to get a bit overpaid. I would be fine if the Bengals did that. They said, you know what, screw it. We want Jalen Phillips. We'll go out there and give him whatever it takes. Dehner projects $25 million against the cap. Yes. It could very well be more than that. A genius move from Roseman to get him. I kind of feel like, and I don't know how the cap situation in Philly looks, but it feels like Roseman will probably do whatever he can to keep him there. But drafted by the Dolphins, went out of Miami, goes to Philadelphia, midseason acquisition for the Eagles, and he's their top guy on the market, not named Trey Hendrickson. So I would be interested in throwing your hat in there, but again, like I'm trying to be as realistic and do what I would do. I feel like if I throw Phillips in there as the guy, that's just not realistic for Cincinnati. Couple other names. Boye Mafe. Keep an eye on him in the Super Bowl for Seattle. Dehner projects $12 million against the cap. He's been a really nice part to a really good defense. He comes in here. He's your 1. Second-round pick. This is finishing out his rookie year, so the age is in a good spot there with him. Boye Mafe is a name to keep an eye on. Odafe Owe, Baltimore Raven, Charger. He's going to get a sizable deal there as well. I'm a little bit worried. The sack numbers aren't quite there, but this class along the defensive line isn't great. Like, you're not seeing some 10, 12 sack guy just sitting in here. It doesn't really happen. And those guys usually aren't available, right? They get paid. Always a name to monitor. He's got great skills. He's a great athlete. I think he kind of fits like the Shamar Stewart type of mold, which I would like to get more production out of that. And I think there's, again, he's been in the league, so we know what you have in him, but there's that element of, well, it's a lot of upside, but I don't know if the production is consistent enough. That's a name to keep an eye on. Bosa. Dehner projects $15 million. He was really good on third down for Buffalo. You have some injury concerns with him. He's got a relationship with Burrow. Maybe that comes into play. I'd be open to getting Joey Bosa as he passes prime, absolutely. But can he show up for you on third down, which is what Cincinnati needs? I would be interested in Joey Bosa, certainly there as well. And then how about Draymond Jones? This one's really interesting because this feels like he kind of feels like a Bengal, honestly. Draymond Jones went to Ohio State. And most recently has kind of bounced around the league a little bit. Most recently has played in Baltimore, and Bengals fans will remember, he kind of gave Joe Burrow some fits this year. And nobody really has done that in the North besides Myles Garrett, of course, and T.J. Watt. But he really flashed in the games against Cincinnati. I don't really know how he looked throughout the other games, but I remember in the Bengals games going, oh, this guy's a bit of a problem. Now, what happened the last time you took a guy that was a Baltimore Raven that played really well against you? Well, his name was Geno Stone. How did that work? Not well. Am I saying that Draymond Jones would be the next Geno Stone? No, but he kind of feels like a Bengal to me. It's like that $11, $12 million range as far as his cap hit goes. They need to part ways with Osai. He kind of feels like the Osai replacement, but he would come in and be the 1, I think, over Miles Murphy. And I think you could have something there. But the whole Baltimore flash against you thing, there's some, bad thoughts, negative thoughts as it relates to that just because of Geno Stone. But he kind of feels like a Bengal to me, honestly. Who else we got on here? Malcolm Kuntz, certainly another name to keep an eye on. Von Miller, $5 million. Dehner projects. Is he washed? Yeah, but he can still play. He flashed a little bit against Washington, right? I mean, we were saying bring him in last year, and then the Bengals obviously didn't do that and didn't believe in that kind of approach. But bringing in an old guy, not something the Bengals ever do, they should adjust and do that, right? It's okay to pay for a guy's services for 1 year that's been around the block. You've tried to do this young thing on defense for so long, and it ain't working, all right? Go out and get a wily veteran. If you have to get, the guy from Buffalo along the interior defensive line, well, he's 35 years old. We're in win-now mode, right? You have the available cap space to go out there and make a move like that this offseason for a rental type of deal. Do it. You have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins in their prime. The time is now. Go out there and be aggressive. So the Burrow restructure, I got to do some more research on that and figure out whether or not that's actually going to happen, because that has a huge impact on how much spending money Cincinnati has this offseason. But would really encourage everybody go out there to The Athletic, check out the simulator. Paul does a great job explaining it. Friend of the show, obviously, of course, Paul Dehner. Mess with it. Send it to me. Give me your thoughts. And I'll try to have a final draft that we won't do a full another segment on it necessarily, but kind of have a final draft that we put out there. I'll post it on my Twitter. And we'll talk about it a little bit here on the show there as well. But the restructure with Burrow is huge. And what's unfortunate is the Bengals' defensive line is so bad, and this free agency class along the defensive line just isn't good, which is why I think they really need to be aggressive with linebacker and go get a big-time difference maker and spend a ton of money there. Like a Nakobe Dean or a Quay Walker would be awesome for this team. But stay tuned on that front for the final draft. And check it out. Do it yourself. It's a lot of fun to kind of mess with it. And Bengals are going to be spending about $35 million against the cap here this offseason.